Hi everyone, this video is going to discuss with you the agents of socialization as well as a few other terms in relation to how we get socialized, some of the more extreme ways in which that occurs. So the following agents are various components within our society that help us become socialized. We talked a lot about family, which is an agent. We talked a lot about nature versus nurture, those ideas. But these agents are other things within a society that really help shape us into who we are. So as you go through this, be sure you're filling in those notes about how they shape our behavior, what are some examples, and then some things in your own life where you see this occurring as well. So the first thing is we talk about family, we talk about gender. I want to identify a little bit more clearly about this one. So parents' gender orientations are often passed down socially to their children in the form of gender roles, expectations for behavior by gender. So if you have a pretty masculine father who really adopts the mentality of what it means to quote unquote be a man, then you're going to see that get passed down to typically the sons and sometimes even the more masculine daughters as well. Same thing on the other side for a woman. If a woman is more domineering as well, that will also get passed down. And so the qualities like being independent, being strong, being in charge, things like that, whatever the parents occupy as a gender orientation, it's also going to follow suit from the parents. There was one experiment that was done where mothers of infants kept their daughters really close, a lot of physical contact, and they talked to them more than the sons were talked to. A few months later, when the kids were put out to play without their parents being there or right there directly in front of them, girls were more hesitant. A lot of them would try to look around and stay close to their mothers, and they would return sooner from play versus staying out and being more independent. And what they were noticing is that mothers were unconsciously rewarding daughters for being more passive, more dependent on them, and they're subconsciously rewarding boys for being more active and independent. So you can see even subconsciously parents providing gender messages to their family about what is expected, and that really shapes us for who we are. Families we talked about. Our families and significant others are the first to teach us and socialize us, hence why it's probably the most important, as well as the fact that it's so long-lasting within our society, that we are constantly being exposed to family for so long. Family and social class, we see a lot of differences in how we get socialized, but if you're in the middle versus the working class, middle class typically talk to their children, support them, provide for a more nurturing environment. Working class, you see a lot more domineering parents. You see a little more physical violence to punish children, a little bit more harsher conditions, a lot because that the working class parents feel a lot more pressure upon themselves. So a lot of times they unfortunately take that out on the children. But we can see that depending on social class, family is going to get socialized in a very different way as well. So we can see here a lot of different aspects playing a role in how we get socialized from our families. The neighborhood is also an important agent of socialization from how we get socialized. Some are obviously better for children than others. If you're surrounded by gangs, they're going to learn the values, beliefs, and norms of the gang and how to survive, by looking at illegitimate opportunity structures. Members of more affluent areas tend to look out for one another. Poor neighborhoods don't really look out for the children, despite the fact that those are probably the neighborhoods that need the most child support and child supervision. But obviously those are in better areas, tend to look out for one another, they feel closer to each other. Poor neighborhoods tend to look out for themselves, perhaps for fear of gang violence, drug use, etc. Which again, as I mentioned before, is really an irony within and of itself. Religion is also an important agent of socialization. Religion really influences our values, which helps to develop one's morals of what's right or wrong, as we talked about in our last unit. Religion is even a significant feature for secular folk. Even those who aren't religious still look to religion as a means for understanding what's right and wrong. But for how much longer? There was a recent Tribune article in the last year that said about 54% of people are religious in this country, but that's declining. Now, what that means exactly, that what quote unquote religious means, that's a whole nother discussion. But the idea here is that whatever the criteria the Tribune was using, only 54% of people were following it, and it's declining, which a country that used to be so heavily bent and set on the religious ways is suddenly changing, or not suddenly, but it's been changing over time. And but again, religion does play a key role of socialization, but again, for how much longer though? Daycare. The hours that children spend in daycare away from the parents is going to influence them. The more hours a child spends in daycare per week, the weaker the bonds they have with their parents, especially the mothers, which I'm sure seems like a very natural thing to understand. They become more socialized from the daycare people and from the children that they're surrounded by, and less by the parents that are supposed to be raising them. School. There's a manifest and latent function of school, which is key to our understanding of socialization, which we talk about fundamental of functionalism. The home teaches you a very specific perspective, but school teaches you a very broad perspective, allowing you to see multiple perspectives and see multiple understandings of things that really help you guys take on different roles in the world. If you were homeschooled, you would only have one perspective, and that could limit your ability to relate to those around you socially. But within this context, you're able to be exposed to more and be more open and understanding. Conflict theorists, CT stands for, call it the hidden curriculum within schools. That school is really a function of teaching you about patriotism, democracy, and how you're supposed to behave, what kind of correct attitudes you're supposed to have. Like, you're supposed to be supportive of the country and believe in democracy and things like that. That school is just the engine by which the government uses it to control what it is that we're supposed to believe. But no matter how the theories look at it, school is clearly a very important agent and a component within our society for how we're socialized. Peer groups. This could be a very another obvious one. Within school, you see there's a great exposure to peer groups, individuals of your similar age, and you're also linked by common interests. And so peer groups that you hang out with, people that you associate with, are very heavily going to socialize you into things that you believe in. You begin to discover the characteristics and norms that make boys and girls quote unquote popular. What music are you supposed to listen to? What movies should you watch? What lingo and terminology should you be using and jargon and vernacular and things like that you're supposed to be using with your friends, that teaches you what's popular and what's not popular, what you should be believing and what you shouldn't believe in. And so peer groups do heavily weigh, especially for you guys right now in teenage years, for what you're supposed to do and how you're supposed to learn. Sports teach us physical skills and values. They also teach us to desire team goals and working together. Boys learn success in sports. That success in sports means that you're masculine, and that you're going to be more accepted, which is why you see a lot of competition for boys to be the best at something, because they learn that means you're being more masculine, which means that you're more of a quote unquote, you're more of a man, and therefore you're better within society. The workplace, we learn new sets of skills and new perspectives. There's something called anticipatory socialization. It's kind of like an internship when you think about it, where you learn to play a role before you actually have to enter it. So it's a rehearsal for a role that you may play in the future. So some of you guys might be able to intern in hospitals, in doctors' offices of all sorts, accounting firms, law firms, businesses. This is called anticipatory socialization, where you get socialized into understanding what the job requires for you, but at the same time, you don't have to actually burden yourself with the real responsibility of what it may call for. So all of those things we just mentioned were all agents of socialization, various things to different degrees in which that help us get socialized into understanding who we are. This is a different term that relates to a different way for how we get socialized, known as resocialization. After we've been socialized into a particular job or way of life for a certain while, we have to learn something new when our experiences change. So things like feral children, when they've been exposed to the environment they've been in for a while, they now have to be exposed to a new environment and learn. When you get divorced, you've been exposed to a certain way of life in your marriage with your children. Now you're on your own again. You'll learn how to live on your own, your new job. All of these are great examples where we see how examples of when our lives have shifted and it's caused us to be exposed to new experiences. We have to learn new values and be re-socialized. It can be really intense, like something called a total institution, which I'll get to in just a moment. So this re-socialization process can be very intense and very stressful upon an individual when they go through it. Total institutions are when you get completely cut off from society, where you're in a certain location where you get completely re-socialized in a particular area, away from all contact with society. Things like military school, in prisons, etc., act as different total institutions for you. And upon arrival at these total institutions, you receive a degradation ceremony, which is a way in which you are stripped of all your individual identity and essentially a stripping of all past socializations you've occurred. It's typically public and pretty humiliating. You think about it in a courtroom, pretty open. That's typically a degradation ceremony when you're sentenced to jail, being stripped down and shaved and things like that within a prison. Those are considered, or in military school, those are certainly examples of degradation ceremonies where you are stripped of your previous socialization process and you get re-socialization into the new society. Feel free to add these few terms to the bottom of your Agents of Socialization notes. We'll talk about all of these and a few more things tomorrow. Have a great day. Make sure you put any questions you have in the interactive guide, and I'll see you then. Take care.